You're listening to Systemic Error Podcast. The failure was designed.
Trump biographer exposes the dangerous addiction that could sink him. A video based on an article by Thomas Quirk. Trump's attention addiction is not a quirk, it is the method, the source material. Michael Wolff's read on Trump at the NATO summit in Ankara is straightforward. The man is driven by attention, not policy, not alliance management, and not any coherent concept of national interest. Wolff says Trump's attacks on Spain, France, Germany, Italy, and the UK, along with his Greenland fixation and his posture toward the Iran ceasefire, all fit the same pattern of command the room, dominate the frame, leave everyone else scrambling. Attention is the policy. The point of this story is not that Trump is hard to understand. The point is that he is easy to understand if you stop pretending there is hidden depth. Wolff's language of addiction is useful only if it is understood as a governing style, not a private flaw. Trump does not merely seek attention as vanity. He uses attention as leverage, distraction, and substitute for statecraft. That matters because it changes the question. The issue is not whether he means what he says in some normal policy sense. The issue is that he reliably turns diplomatic settings into statecraft and then calls the spectacle results. Allies as targets. The allies in this account are not equal players in a shared drama. They are the people being used as props in Trump's performance. Spain, France, Germany, Italy, and the UK are singled out not because they suddenly became the central problem in transatlantic politics, but because attacking them is useful for Trump's self-positioning. That is the real institutional power dynamic here. He is not negotiating among peers. He is asserting that the US, meaning his own ego filtered through the office, must be the only gravitational center. Everyone else is reduced to an audience or an obstacle. Psychologizing the damage. Wolff and Joanna Coles frame this as a psychological puzzle, even a childhood origin story. That is a familiar way of softening political harm. It invites readers to treat domination as pathology, as if the damage becomes more legible once it is explained as emotional need. But the article's own details point elsewhere. Trump is not merely a damaged man acting out. He is a political actor using the presidency as a camera pointed at himself. Calling that addiction can be accurate, but it can also become a way to miss the institutional fact American foreign policy is being personalized, and allies are expected to absorb the cost. The real misdirection. The weakest move in this kind of coverage is to treat deliberate disruption as if it were confusion. Wolff pushes back against earnest journalists trying to make sense of Trump. Fair enough. But the larger problem is not just journalists overinterpreting him. It is a political culture still willing to search for strategy where there is often only appetite for domination. Even the suggestion that Trump may have let a ceasefire deal with Iran unravel in order to own the summit is revealing. Whether or not that inference is correct, it captures the logic of the era if attention is the prize. Then stability, alliances, and even de-escalation become negotiable. What this reveals. This story is not really about Trump's personality. It is about the degradation of office into performance and the degradation of foreign policy into a branding exercise. That is how authoritarian politics often works in practice, and not through grand doctrine, but through endless acts of self-exaltation that make the state revolve around one man's appetite. The larger pattern is simple. When political power is organized around attention instead of accountability, institutions stop governing and start orbiting. Trump is not an anomaly inside that system. He is what happens when the system keeps rewarding spectacle and calling it leadership. You've been listening to Systemic Error. Thanks to Alternet for today's article. With the automated voice of Kristen, thanks for listening.